So given the celebration of 35 years since Alma Ata, I'm dedicating this talk to Dr. Carl Taylor, late Professor Emeritus at Johns Hopkins, who many of you know. I thank him for the privilege of having him as a professor and also for the privilege of working with him for the last 14 years of his life. So much of the material that I'm going to be presenting is elaborated in more detail in 2 seat-scale books. The Empowerment on an Unstable Planet, which is a follow-up to Just and Lasting Change, and also drawing on a series of country program experiences, Future Generations work in China, India, Peru, Afghanistan, and Haiti, looking at lessons learned. So I want to ask, how many of you have heard of seed scale before? Can you raise your hand? Oops, everybody, a lot of people. And how many of you would say that you know it in depth, that you've read the books, that you, oh, okay, thank you. Carl Taylor, as you may know, co-wrote the background papers and designed the global strategy for the conference of Alma Ata. The theme was Health for All. An interesting anecdote I wanted to share is that years later, Carl found the notes that he had taken while he was sitting on the dais at the Alma Ata conference. And he had written in his notes that some people are saying health for all, and other people were saying health for all. So he was tabulating how many, where people were mentioning those different inflections, and he had 147 references. So he found that one type of inflection was mainly expressed by the first or second world's people, and the other type was mainly by people from the third world. So over the next 30 years, he found that health for all had predominated, that the focus was on new technologies, health delivery systems, international assistance programs, and that the local existing technologies focus more on people and not on professionals were those that were basically ignored. So health for all is what has dominated. So just briefly going through the successors of Alma Ata, within 6 years of Alma Ata, which was an integrated global development strategy for health, it was reduced to GOBI, growth monitoring, oral rehydration, breastfeeding, and immunizations, as you know, and then the FFF was added on, realizing that GOBI was a little limited, family planning, female education, and did I get the other one? Feeding. And then moving on to IMCI, and IMCI with nutrition, maternal neonatal child health, reproductive maternal neonatal child health. So more recently, we're getting back to more integrated approaches, and finally a promise renewed now. And we now know that we do need to go back to looking at the community. But in general, as the Taylors point out, it was the business of health that had really predominated in most of these years since Alma Ata. Dr. Hofton-Mahler was secretary of the World Health Organization for 15 years and presided over the Alma Ata conference. And he was also a lifelong friend and collaborator of Dr. Carl Taylor's. And he said in the year 2009, "We had it wrong in 1998. What came about was health for all, as the business of health stole the idea." So lost and still not found. So many of us were left wondering, where is community in these strategies? Where are the values for equity and sustainability that were inherent in Alma Ata? And we're lost in this technological rush for looking at and getting the low-hanging fruit, and the vertical programs, and how to approach the community. Those present in this room are very aware and dedicated to working with communities, but we're not the entire global health community either. But we have all experienced these short programs, 4 to 5 year programs, and then when the outside change agent leaves, things go back to normal within a very short time. And so due to all of these things, that was already seen in 1990. James Grant, who was executive director of UNICEF, approached Daniel and Carl Taylor with the realization that the traditional aid was not working. And he said, I want the two of you to co-chair a task force to explain the lack of correlation between the amount of money that UNICEF invests in a project and the project output. So he was basically charging them to look at the dynamics of social change. And this actually resulted from two long conversations. One was between Daniel Taylor and James Grant on an 18-hour flight from New York to New Delhi, and there was another conversation between James Grant and Carl Taylor in a trans-China train ride. And considering yesterday we heard about another trip between Dory Storms and Sarah Shannon, I think we should all learn that the next long trip we take, we should make sure we sit next to a special person so that we will come up with the next groundbreaking idea for international health. So, as you know, the Taylors embarked on a worldwide study of successful experiences in community change, and they found what were the common elements between these programs that had been successful in achieving equity, achieving sustainability, and they deductively developed the seed scale methodology out of real experiences in the world. And so the core concept is this human energy, that you first have to find a seed of human energy, an activity in your community that the community views as a success, that the community itself did, and then you grow that seed to scale. The idea of human energy is the key factor here, and Daniel Taylor is currently digging down on that concept and looking at the science of atomic and quantum mechanics theory to better understand the dynamics of energy and how that is related to human endeavor. And I think he's kind of on the track there. But seed scale is not just a tool in the International Development Toolbox. And the means of delivery of seed scale is via education, which is more scalable than financing, to be short. We have the basics of seed scale that's summarized on a handout on your table so that I don't have to spend a lot of my time going through it. There's 5 criteria, 4 principles, and 7 tasks, and 3 levels of scale, so it's fairly easy to understand. I'll just run through some of these. First of all is a criteria that guides direction. And the process of change needs guidance and evaluation from 5 perspectives. And of course, equity, sustainability, also holism, not just health, but everything in the person's life and the community's life. Interdependence between different partners, and iteration. You never get it right the first time. You have to keep going over and over and over in a process that repeats annually or monthly. The first principle out of 4 principles, the 4 principles are all necessary for sustainable social change. The first principle is the most important one, and it's building from success. So first of all, you identify what's working and strengthen that. And this is the one that's most frequently dismissed principle. It's not based on failures of the community, which is very dismotivating to the community, but it energizes the community to see what they did and what they can build on. Three-way partnership is also critical, looking at the bottom-up community mobilization, the top-down enabling environment, which is the laws and the policies of government, also financing of government, and then the outside-in ideas and mentorship, which is most of us, but does not include money, does not include financing, it's the ideas, and that's critical. We have to get the financing from the government set into place, even if we're giving money to the government to pass it down through, but that's more sustainable, so the government eventually puts in their own money. Evidence-based decisions, that the community finds their own information and makes their own, does their own community mapping, for example, And the final principle is behavior change with a sample work plan. Then we have the 7 cycles that helps human energy grow, 7 tasks. And starting with a local coordinating committee, identifying successes, studying successes elsewhere, gathering local evidence, creating a local work plan, implementing the plan, and making mid-course corrections. And then going to scale, as we can see, a scale 1 or a seed system, a community that's working well, but not a community, but a whole system. How is a community and the 3-way partnership and everything working well? How that then becomes a teaching learning center, and then how the scale cubed will be a policy and financing framework where the government has committed to financing it, to creating policy to set this into stone, okay? And this will be a sustainable community government program. Okay, finally, lessons learned after that. First of all, we'll have to go through quickly that seed scale is not a linear process. It does not start with the seed and then go to scale. Sometimes you start with scale. Sometimes you start with a law, and then you see how can we best implement that law in a seed process, and then start teaching other people, etc. And so in each one of our country programs, we've had a different way of applying the seed scale process. It's not linear whatsoever. And as an example, I want to show you how in Peru, the primary healthcare system had different elements of the government that were separate from each other, and the association with the community was very poorly defined. And then the government created a law with local health administration committees, which is a committee, which is one of the first tasks, to administer funds for the primary health care facility with representation and participation of the community. Okay, so we have a scale cubed situation, which is national policy, but it wasn't working very well, and so the outside-in organization, Future Generations, came in to help make this a whole seed process, to really work with the community, to make all these linkages that's in blue colors, how the community can get in. Okay, and I'm getting close to the end. I also want to say that seed scale is used in various levels as a framework for program managers and also in the community. We talked about what is a community. It's community can be also in the government, is a community that we're working with, and different parts of a health facility is also a community that we're working with to apply the 7 steps. How to pick the right community, we found out that we have to first of all identify which communities have most energy to start off with, and that's where we start. We don't just pick any one, but the first ones that start will get more energized and will spread to others with their contagion of their interest. The most resource poor communities and women participate first. There's roles of the change agent in the 3-way partnership. What can the PVO do? We can amplify the impact of government outreach. Or extension programs build the capacity of people and communities. Connect community dreams with government resources is an important role. Educate the government about the importance of community empowerment. How to sustain the scale squared centers, which are the teaching learning centers. We found that introducing a business model to these scale squared centers will frequently provide them with sustainability, such as ecotourism, having a community center, building an ecotourism hotel will bring in money, tourists to an area, and they will be able to use that to continue teaching other communities how to implement the work that they're doing with community health workers and with working with communities to promote conservation of the natural environment. Compatibility with the logical framework? No, not really, but there is a solution. By having each one of our partners have a set of goals for each one of our partners, for the community partners and for the government partners, for the health services, and go through each one of those partners through the 7 tasks as steps of operational steps in the seed scale methodology. I don't know if that's very clear, but there's more cost effectiveness with the seed scale methodology. We've seen this very clearly in our projects, where the communities are providing the energy and the government is providing the policy and the financing. It's also more sustainable. The top-down as real partners in development takes a lot of time. You have a lot of obstacles from the government to form a 3-way partnership that's effective because of the habits of authority and control, corruption, et cetera. So we need long-term advocacy with the government, champions both inside and outside the government, organizing consortiums of like-minded NGOs in the country and consortiums of communities. Okay. So just as a final word to say that this is seed scale is an operational strategy, and what can we learn from, for Alma Ata is that we really need to go to health for all, going back to my first slide. Building on community energy and 3-way partnerships. Thank you very much.
Thank you.